Hey, good morning from beautiful California. My name is Stuart Williams and welcome to M365 Chicago virtual event. Today's secret word is power automate, power automate. So come on down and enter in your prize. We're going to talk about our three different journeys to the cloud and what we learned by doing them. Feel free to come off mute and answer ask any questions you may have. Otherwise, if you could stay on mute, we're also recording these, so they will be available for your viewing pleasure later. So, who am I? My name is Stuart Williams. I'm the Magenic Cloud Practice Lead, and here's my info. I have a lot of YouTube videos on cloud migration that you can watch. And so hopefully those will be a nice supplement to what we're going to talk about today. And so today we're going to talk about three different kinds of cloud journeys: lift and shift, modernization, and in the lift and shift area, what we're talking about is usually just VM migrations to the cloud. You have a data center, it's full of VMs, and you have decided that it would be cheaper or more cost effective to have those up in a cloud and potentially downsize or close your data center. It's a common driver for lift and shift projects, or your data center is simply at capacity and you need to be able to scale out your data center. So that's a lift and shift where we're keeping your existing data center and extending it into the cloud. So lift and shift implies that you're going to try to leave as much stuff the way it is as you can. And we'll talk about the kind of pros and cons and limitations to that. At the exact opposite end is greenfield. You say, well, I've got some of these automated systems, but they're kind of old. They no longer do what I want them to do. I need new functionality. I want to take advantage of the features that I can only get in the cloud. I want scalability. I want resiliency. I want DR. I want all these wonderful things. So I'm going to build a brand new application system or systems in the cloud. And I'm gonna, my aspiration is to start clean and make everything cloud native. And the space in the middle is actually the typical 80% use case. That what we're going to do is look at what you have and decide which things need to be modernized and by how much. And so it's a balance of potentially dragging a lot of legacy things into the cloud and maybe not realizing some of the benefits or cost savings versus the always interesting and fun starting from a blank sheet of paper. So modernization is that space in the middle, and we'll talk about that as we go along. So there's some big questions when you're moving to the cloud that you need to consider. And the first is your organization ready for the cloud? The people, processes, and preparation required are not insignificant. Everyone in your organization involved in technology or in the systems that you're intending to build or migrate has to be reset to be cloud focused. So it's not just the obvious folks like developers and quality assurance, but it's DevOps and InfoSec and networking and infrastructure. And then to a really significant degree, your business folks have to think about automated systems in new ways based on what the cloud can offer them. So if you have a lot of, for example, legacy governance artifacts, right, those things are going to need to be updated to make sense in the cloud. They may or may not have made sense in the data center. Many of them will definitely not make sense in the cloud. The next thing is, do you have an inventory of the things you want to either move or build to the cloud? Most of this talk is going to be about moving things to the cloud. And For each thing in your inventory, do you have a disposition? So what's a disposition? Disposition is, let's take a real life case study. I have a system that has a web front end. It's got some services in the middle tier. It's got storage in the form of a SAN. It's got email connectivity through our on-premise Exchange server. It's got a number of different databases. In this particular system we moved, it had 4 different kinds. So it had Oracle, it had SQL Server, it had some MySQL, and it even had some Mongo. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's the inventory that they had. And we can break that down into smaller and smaller pieces. So getting back to the disposition, for each of those pieces, we have to decide whether or not we're going to get rid of it, replacing it with something else. We're going to tolerate it, which is typically to move it to the cloud with as few changes as possible. We're going to modernize it to some degree. We're going to uplift what we have, or we are going to completely rewrite it, right? It's important when you're talking with your organization about moving to the cloud that you start with an inventory. You have to know what you have in order to make good business decisions about it. And so for each component, there are some things that are going to factor into that decision. Is there a cost differential to run that thing in the data center versus the cloud? Is it significant? Is it a savings? Turns out the answer to that question can be no. And that's something you have to think about. Will it run in the cloud at all? Very old versions of third-party software, or if you have old runtimes, like old PHP or old .NET or old Java, they may not be allowed to run in the vendor's cloud, right? So you may have to, at the very least, uplift the runtimes or upgrade your SQL Server version or your Oracle or whatever, and that will break stuff. It will. So you've got to, you know, taking the inventory and knowing what you have, and then deciding the disposition has got that and many other factors. And we're going to talk about that more as we go along. But, you know, you need to have a list of stuff, and you need to know everything that you need to know about it in order to determine a disposition. And you can't determine a disposition until you have a strategy. So the question is, what does success look like for your organization? And the one we hear most often is, it's better. Okay, well, it can be better in lots of ways. I have a famous saying that there's nothing wrong with my software that getting rid of all the users wouldn't fix. The business might not agree with that definition of success, though. So it's really important to have some business goals from the business stakeholders. Typically, they come in the form of functionality that they want, of enablement, like certain things they couldn't do before, like be all over the world. There are technology stakeholders, and they want things. They want to be on supported versions of runtimes and operating systems so you can continue to get vendor support. InfoSec pretty much wants the same thing, and they want better security. They want defense in depth. So you have to write down the success criteria for each of the stakeholders and then prioritize it. And then you need to say, we have achieved this success criteria item, this acceptance criteria, if you will. If you're a QA, you think a lot about acceptance criteria. How do I measure to know that that thing that I wanted is true? And if you don't have a way to measure it, it's probably ill-conceived, because there's no way to win or lose. There's no way to determine success or failure. So always do things with measurement in mind, and particularly moving to the cloud. And have you done your due diligence, right? One of the things that I saw happen with one of our clients is they were absorbed by a larger organization. They merged, for lack of a better word. I'm not going to say that's what they did, but their small organization got moved into a bigger organization. And that bigger organization had very crisp definitions of what they wanted out of architecture and technology stacks. And the company that got absorbed wasn't in alignment. And they wanted them to immediately hollow out their data centers and move stuff to the cloud. But the cloud they were moving to wasn't necessarily a great home for the software that ran that company, now a division of this bigger company. So you really have to go and do your due diligence, not just around how much things will cost, but are you able to take the current capabilities that you have that business users expect and continue to have those capabilities? It's okay if they're done in a new way, right? But if you haven't done your due diligence, you're going to have a tough time defining success criteria, and you're going to have an even tougher time. One of the things that we see customers do is decide on a cloud provider in haste based solely on cost. It doesn't matter if it's the cheapest thing on earth. If it doesn't support the capabilities that your organization needs, or you'll have to write them yourselves, which is never a happy thing, then it may not be as good an economic trade-off as is going to a cloud vendor that has at least part of what you want. And there's a rubric about build versus buy. And our general advice is the lower level something is, the better off you are buying it, not building it. So don't build your own database engines. Don't build your own cryptography. Don't build your own secrets and configuration management. Don't build your own web server from scratch, right? Those are fundamental things upon which the actual code and data that delivers business value sit on. So do your due diligence to make good choices. And you have to have a cost management strategy. One of the things that we've noticed when we went in to do studies about what is the economics of moving this set of systems, this portfolio to a cloud, is that we're unable to find out what their true cost of ownership, their total cost of ownership was in the data center, because the spend was so diffuse over the organization, they had no way of tracking it. And they had no way of articulating what spend per year would equate to an equal or greater value of business value. In other words, the thing should provide business value greater than the cost of ownership, right? So we want BV greater than or equal to TCO, right? So, you need a cost management strategy. And if you're going to be moving into the cloud, the other thing that will probably cause some of your friends in finance and accounting to have palpitations is you're moving from essentially fixed or sunk costs in the data center most of the time to being all variable costs all the time. And much of the variability comes in scaling, and much of the variability comes in the fact that the more your system gets used, every one of those use interactions in one way or another is a taximeter, right? So you need cost management tools, and usually these are handily provided by the cloud vendor. AWS, Google, Oracle, all the major vendors, my personal favorite, Azure, they all have cost management tools, and you should use them from the first day. They can even be used to calculate how much it would cost to move something and what its day two running cost is. In other words, what are your day in and day out costs, and how does that change as you scale? And so have a cost management strategy, have a cost management tool, and someone should have the job of watching the costs and making sure that they're in alignment with your program goals. And it's something that's eminently measurable, right? We said you want to measure success. So it can cost more in the cloud than it did in the data center if it's delivering more business value. E.g., it's supporting more customers or supporting more orders or has a better throughput or whatever. But you need to know what it costs and what benefits it's delivering. And again, we're going to come back to this thing of reasonable and measurable. So there's this acronym that I love called SMART. And it means that your goal is specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. So specific, right? We want to be like the cloud, not specific enough. We want the portfolio detailed in Appendix C, operational in the cloud on this day. Okay, that's specific, measurable. It's got actions, right? It's relevant. Why is it relevant? Because it's what's in scope, and it's time-bound, right? So when you're making goals, when you're trying to define success, when you're trying to define requirements, remember the SMART acronym and apply that, because you know you've done something, you've articulated something well if it passes that kind of 5-part test. One of the huge headaches that you wouldn't expect, but that we encounter every single time we do any kind of cloud project, is about networking. Here's the takeaway about networking, if you're not a technical person. The networking in your data center and the networking in the cloud are profoundly different in both obvious and subtle ways. And the skill set that manages your networking on your data center is not the same skill set as what's needed to successfully set up, manage, and configure networks in the cloud. Now, the good news is those people can learn, but they shouldn't be allowed to think even for a moment that they aren't going to have to learn and change in order to be successful in the cloud. And all the major cloud vendors offer specifically consulting in how to set up the network in the cloud to achieve the goals that you have without actually trying to copy over the topology that you may have in the data center, which I guarantee you is not appropriate for the cloud. So don't forget the network, because everything else you're going to do sits on top of it. And what we see customers repeatedly do is make the terrible mistake of not iterating on their cloud network design, or trying to do it while they're physically moving VMs or setting up PaaS or SaaS or whatever on the cloud. And the analogy I'll give you is it's trying to change the wheels on a moving car. It's a bad, bad thing. So here's our advice. 1, get some expert help from people who really know how the network on this cloud works. So if you're on Azure, get a hold of the Azure Network Rangers and let them help you. If you're on AWS, get a hold of their experts. If they're on GCP, get a hold of their experts, because they are very different. But the differences are subtle, but they're incredibly important, or your apps will simply not do the things the way you want in a safe and secure way. They just won't. Is your software cloud ready? So if you have a piece of software, for example, you have a website and it runs on your web server in the data center, and you've had to provision a lot of web servers behind a load balancer because the thing keeps falling over or splitting or providing a bad user experience because it doesn't stay up, right? Here's the thing about the cloud. The cloud is an electron microscope on the stability, scalability, and security of your apps. So there are lots of great tools, including a host of free tools that you can point at your software and source code and ask the question, what is between us and success? And if it finds things, you're now out of the straight migration area and into the migration and modernization area. And the best criteria I've ever seen for judging an app, it's what we use during our architecture review process, our portfolio review process at Magenic, is we use the 12-factor criteria. And we actually have an expanded worksheet that lets us go through and for each portfolio item very rapidly determine what the delta is between not being able to run in the cloud at all, and then the different stages of cloud, so cloud ready, it'll run in the cloud with coercion, to all the way to cloud native. It is a first-class citizen in the cloud. And just because you have to modernize doesn't mean you have to go the entire distance from not ready to run in the cloud to cloud native, right? Unless there's additional business value, right? There's the investment in effort, in money to make it flow up that continuum from not ready to run in the cloud all the way to cloud native, right? If there is an investment there with a payoff, with an ROI, with new capabilities, with whatever, then absolutely you should do that. But understand, it's not an on-off thing. It's a continuum. And it takes considerable judgment and experience to look at a component and look at its problems and go, what is required to make this function as a good citizen in my application system up on this cloud? And Magenic can help. Blatant plug. So this is kind of the continuum where off screen is not ready to run at all. And then ready, it'll run with some coercion. Friendly, it runs better. Resilient, it can take advantage of some of the cloud resiliency features. And then native, it can take a full advantage. But understand that as we move from left to right, we're going to spend more money on modernization, and that has to be justified in the form of business value. And business value is not just making money. It's risk management, which is avoiding spending money in the future, or playing cost effectiveness. We say, well, we're going to have to spend $200,000 to do these things, but they will save us year on year, thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of dollars in not meeting our SLAs, or loss of business, or constantly having the organization beaten to death by incidents and outages, alarms and allegations. Say hallelujah. So there's a continuum here that needs to be contemplated. And everybody knows this Peter Drucker quote, right? Measure, measure, measure. And there are lots of good tools for this, but what you get out of measurement tools is data. And what you want is something smart, something actionable. Smart being the anagram for what you're aiming for. So we need to be able to turn managements into KPIs so that we can make decisions. So make a plan, right? Start with identifying your portfolio, identify all the bumps in the road to your particular migration, and make a plan, but be willing to be ductile about that plan. In OCS, they tell us that no plan survives contact with the enemy. It's absolutely true. So make a plan, and then work the plan, and then revise the plan, and keep doing it until you get to success. So for each of the use cases we're going to cover, right, we've got to ask some questions like, what would have been good to know before we started this journey? How do we measure if the journey is going to plan? And what does success look like? So let's break some of these down, and then we'll go into specifics. So in your inventory, right, an inventory is a collection of the things that make up your portfolio. Portfolio is, I have this application system that does sales support. I've got this application system that does order management. I've got this system that does pick, pack, and ship. I've got, right? So those are all, right? Below that is the inventory. That is the moving pieces that comprise that system. So we want to know about, VMs, and we want to know about, their operating systems, and we want to know their networking, and we want to know the software loadout, because we have to go and ask the question, will those things play nice in the cloud, or do we need to do an upgrade? As we've talked about networking a lot, it's huge. I can't say the word network enough in this presentation. But the other big one that is really quite challenging sometimes is storage. It's not that clouds don't have storage. They do have storage. They have splendiferous storage options, but they're different than in the data center. Most data centers have one or more big SANs with fiber channel connections, a separate data backbone that goes to all the pizza boxes and all the racks. And because they have a SAN, they can do some stuff that would be different to do in the cloud. So understand the storage differences. How much storage do you have? If your storage is mostly hard disk images, well, that's a pretty easy problem to solve in the cloud. But if you have enormous oceans of data, terabytes of data, right, that you need to manipulate and accrue and do things with in the cloud, you probably ought to give that one some thought. Here's the other thing. We go to do these cloud migration projects, and the organization as a whole has kind of gotten a pass from compliance. But the second we start moving things into the cloud, we now have to care about, we should have been before, but now it's super visible to everyone, that we have to care about data sovereignty. A lot of the times we're out of SLA with our customers, and we said, well, we're just out of capacity in the data center. Well, the second we move to the cloud, customers are going to go, the cloud is infinite. How can you have capacity issues? And internal compliance rules, right? So be aware that, the other one that falls into that pile is, you can have kind of iffy security in the data center, and it's kind of okay because you aren't that much of a target. But the second you move to the cloud, there's a big old target painted on your back. So the public cloud vendors have tons of really good security best practices. And just like your networking team's going to need some training, your InfoSec team's going to need some training. And the two have to work together along with ops and the application and engineering teams to make sure that all of this comes together. And one of the things we've seen when people don't know their inventory is we get some percentage of the way of moving critical system foo up to the cloud, which absolutely positively must be running the first of pick your month here, and only to discover that there are these little clusters of things over in the corner that no one's thought about for 20 years that have been sort of ticking away, but they're not going to move to the cloud because for one reason or another, they can't. And that's a big oh no moment, an oh no moment you wouldn't have had to have if you'd done an inventory. I'll point out that there are plenty of really good tools to do inventories with, and almost all the major cloud vendors will offer you a tool to say, look, you want to make this journey to the cloud. That's good for us. You'll be paying us money. Here's this tool, and it's either cheap or free, or you get a credit based on, how much business you move to the cloud, right? And these tools are splendid. They're splendid in helping you build an inventory, which you can then roll up into a portfolio, which then you can decide a disposition for each of the pieces of. They're splendid. But I've only ever had one customer in over a decade that's actually let us install and run the tool in their data center. And so, you know, we're working pretty much blind. We got to take people's word for it. But I guarantee you that in that scenario, you're taking on more risk than if you would just let these inventory tools run in your data center. Because you'll find stuff that you didn't know you owned. And you may identify cost-saving opportunities immediately. Wow, these 5 racks of servers have been running for years and no one knows what they do. And so you turn them off one day and you wait and nothing bad happens. Well, you just did cost recovery, or cost avoidance anyway. So we talked about these. And these 5 things, I promise you, are different in the cloud. We haven't talked about management, monitoring, and awareness yet, but we will. So we need some measures, right? So here are our top out-of-the-box measures. When we look at a particular customer situation, we often come up with an equally long list that's more specific. We often take things off this list entirely. But these are the measures that are starting place that kind of work for everyone. And most of them are pretty obvious. But I want to touch on 3 of them because they never fail to be a problem if we don't focus on them. And that is the automation piece. That is to say, if you're going to move to the cloud, having manual processes in the data center is an anathema on a good day. Having them be manual in the cloud is as close to fatal as I've ever seen anything. So automation will set you free. Automation is any repeatable process, ideally without any people in it. The other thing is that your application systems are going to perform differently in the cloud. So if you don't have some sort of performance benchmarks on your on-prem solutions, then there's no nice way of saying that at some point in the migration, you know, pre-go live, that your performance, scale, stability, security, etc., is equivalent or better than it was when it was running in the data center. Again, we come back to measurement. And then I want to talk briefly about day 2 operations. So what is a day 2 operation? A day 2 operation is on day 1, the thing went live. On day 2, you have to operate it, both from a technical point of view, but also from a business point of view. Do you know on what cadence that you'll be updating these systems? We know that once we move to the cloud, we have an obligation that the vendor puts upon us to stay current on runtime versions, operating system versions, security patches, best practices. We know that the vendor themselves is going to rev things like storage and virtual machines and other things, right? Those are day 2 concerns. So we need to make sure we have a plan. We need to make sure that we have monitoring, logging, and awareness for both application, system, and security concerns, right? The thing needs to be ready to operate when it goes live. And I was on 2 projects and everybody kept kicking the can on what they were going to do about day 2 operations and just, well, let's just get it to the cloud, get it to the cloud, get it to the cloud. And that's great. And we got it to the cloud and it went live. And then we had our first problem and we realized we didn't have any of the policy, procedure, or awareness required to work the problem. Who owns this part of the problem? When there's a network problem, who are the responders? It can't be Fred. Fred gets hit by a bus and, you know. So you need some measures. So we talked about success factors. I want to point out an interesting success factor that has, other than the things we've already talked about, and that is migration and modernization programs are not waterfall. They're the anti-waterfall. And Agile is kind of okay, but it introduces a lot of ceremonies that are appropriate for greenfield new software development that are not good for something that's fundamentally an engineering problem. So I'd like to put in a plug for Kanban. And the reason for that is that at any time, if we're stuck on anything else, we can red post-it note it or red flag it or, whatever it, and then we can just work on something else. And this idea of Kanban, right, of never being stopped anywhere and always knowing the visibility of the right items and who's working them is a good thing. And the last thing is, during the execution and even into your day 2 operations, you've got to know when to stop and think and ask the question, did we do the right thing in the right way? And if not necessarily why not. Blame is a game you can play anytime. It's fun for the whole family. But what you really want to do if you're truly an engineering-oriented operation is say, how could we do this better, easier, cheaper, faster, right? Have a stop and a think. So let's talk about some specifics around lift and shift. So here's our plan statement. Okay. So what are 5 big things about moving VMs into the cloud? I'm going to take it as read that we've done our due diligence and we've done our networking. We've engaged the vendor, and the vendor has told us on their platform that this is how you should do the networking for your VMs, and this is how your security layers should look and all that good stuff. The first thing is operating system versions. For very good reasons, cloud vendors will not let you run down-level OSs on their beautiful, squeaky clean cloud because they not only may not interoperate well with the virtualization tier, they may consume resources in excess of what are being visibly delivered to you. In other words, they have a hidden operations cost. They have a hidden resource cost that impacts the vendor that doesn't necessarily impact you. Although I guarantee you, since, rain falls down, you will probably hear about it at some point. But the problem with upgrading your operating system is that the things that run on it, the system and application software, may not like to be on an upgraded operating system. And there you start a chain of upgrading, right? So one of the things we always say is, you've done an inventory, right? You can do a unique on that inventory and find every combination of operating system software, and application software, and then you can try an upgrade with some sort of a testing plan to see what happens, right? You can build a new one in parallel. Great thing about VMs, you can just build a new one in parallel, and you can see what the problems are. But the other problem that people don't think about is licensing. In order to run the new third-party software on a new operating system, or indeed on a new environment, you may have to consider that the licensing terms have changed. So in addition to licensing based on a number of vCPUs or the number of virtual machines or what have you, they may have special licensing rules about running things in the data center versus running things in the cloud. And I've run into at least 3 cases where vendors flatly said, no, thou shalt not run our software in the cloud under any circumstances. It's not they didn't offer a cloud licensing model. They just said no. Uh-oh. If that's a key piece of system or application software, you now have to either decide you're going to keep part of your data center running and run in a hybrid mode where those old things are still running in your data center, and we hope we have enough network bandwidth between the cloud and your data center for that to happen kind of okay, or you have to go on a snipe hunt for a replacement if there is one. And if there is one, you have to go through the not inconsiderable period of time in most organizations to do the acquisition, the validation, the compliance work, etc. So better to know early. The other thing that is problematic is the runtimes that power the code you and your team wrote, right? If you're on an old version of Java or .NET or PHP or Python, the cloud vendor may not let you run on the old versions. They may want you to run on the new versions. And if you've missed a bunch of major version upgrades in a row for whatever reason, your code will break, right? You'll go to compile it or target it at the new runtime and it just won't work. And you're going to have to invest time and effort. And again, there are plenty of splendiferous tools, many of them free, that you can run on your source code and figure out whether or not your code will run correctly. The same thing is true for databases. A lot of databases have this idea, Microsoft calls it compatibility mode, which is let this new system software run as if it were running the old version. But compatibility mode, if you're on VMs, may still be an option. But if you want to switch to the cheaper, more scalable, more robust, disaster recovery enableable version that's running in PaaS, well, no, you shall be at the most recent version. And then the Venn diagram of the vendor's PaaS offering and their infrastructure as a service offering, those two circles probably overlap a lot. But what's in the 20% on either side? Well, the 20% of the PaaS stuff is new capabilities and opportunities. And the 20% of the stuff that is available only on virtual machines is to some degree the boat anchor holding you back. And if you don't happen to need any of that stuff, then hurrah, right? You can move to PaaS. But again, operationally, operating a system on virtual machines and operating a system in PaaS are two different things. So you're going to have to relearn a lot of operational procedures, including backing up and restoring and high availability and disaster recovery. The other thing about virtual machines in the cloud we've talked about, and that's the speed of organizing storage. And I'll point out that some vendors throttle the IOPS, which is the number of IO operations per second, to and from storage as a function of how spendy your virtual machine is. Google is one of them. So you have to understand that, because if something about how quickly your applications are talking to data on disk changes, the behavior of your applications and their ability to do the things you want them to do in the time you want them to do them in may change graphically. So there's some coach notes on VM migration. There's a famous naval battle between Rome and Carthage. And the Roman admiral and his fleet can only be described as a severe beating. And this quote, nisi quid tibi protest, is save what you can. So the rule of thumb for doing a migration with modernization, so we're not going to run our web stuff on top of IIS anymore, or on top of whatever your favorite Nginx or Apache or whatever your favorite web browser is. We're going to run them platform as a service, for example, in Azure App Services, because A, it's cheaper, B, there's a bunch of capabilities we want, and C, we get a bunch of things like auto scaling on the cheap. But you're going to have to make some tweaks to your code to make that happen, maybe. Or maybe you won't. Again, tooling is your friend here. So when you're deciding which bits to completely swap out or not, it's tempting to make that decision based on liking or disliking a particular set of capabilities or a particular code base. But the general rule of thumb you should follow is save what you can. In other words, see what happens when you make the minimum possible changes to something in order to get it to run in the new place in the new way, and then tweak from there. There's an old saying for developers who come from a strong computer science background that says, few things are a bigger waste of time than premature optimization. And the save what you can rule neatly encapsulates that idea. This idea that we do not want to just rewrite or refactor or uplift or change everything. We want to change as a first pass. We want to change as little as possible. Get it running in the cloud, see where our problem areas are, solve those, see where our opportunity areas are, see if those actually really are opportunities, and then do that. And then greenfield. Be cloud native right from the start. And I will tell you that the way to do that is to truly understand how the cloud you're going to works in the context of the famous 12-factor manifesto. And we've got lots of YouTube videos on that. You can go watch them. But again, the architects and team leads and developers in QA that were able to build something to serve the needs of the business in your data center are not going to be the same people that let you be successful in the cloud without some help, right? So it's not that they can't learn, it's that in order to learn the right things in the right ways, they need the right partner to help guide them to success, show them what things that were good patterns in the data center, or at least okay ones, are terrible patterns in the cloud, and what modern cloud patterns there are that will change the way they think about architecting and designing and delivering software. So that's my little spiel. Any questions? All right, I'm going to hang out here for a while, and I will also answer your questions by email or on the posts on my YouTube channel. And this is me. And just a reminder that we have a secret phrase that you can use to enter the contest. And that secret phrase is Power Automate. So there you go.